Hello, I'm Bungay Stanier. I'd like to welcome you on the new episode of Leadership Execution Podcast, a podcast for leaders who'd like to make a difference. My goal is to inspire you to take the initiative, to change what no longer works, and to provide you with the necessary strategies, approaches, and tools to achieve that. Without delay, let's start with today's topic.
Hello everybody, Tyson Nasir here. Welcome to the Leadership Execution Podcast, a podcast for leaders everywhere in the world. If this is your first time listening to this show, then I'd like to thank you for being here and I hope to have you on the show again. Now, let's start today's episode without delay. I'd like to introduce you to Michael Bungay Stanier. Who is Mr. Stanier? Michael Bungay Stanier is the founder of Box of Crayons, one of the leading companies consulting, training and coaching areas, award-winning coach and top-notch author. Michael's most recent book, The Coaching Habit, has sold more than 3,500 copies and has been the #1 coaching book on Amazon since its release. Michael is a Rhodes Scholar and was recently recognized as the #3 global coaching guru. Recently, he's focused his attention on performance management. But I have said enough about Michael. It is better to let Michael tell us about what he is doing, how and why. Hello, Michael, and welcome to Leadership Execution Podcast. I'd like to thank you for being here. Hi.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm just gonna boast a moment about the Coaching Habit book. You said it had sold, I think 3,500 copies. It's actually sold more than.
It was right. 300.
More than 400,000 copies
yes,
now. In fact, it's almost 500,000 copies, which is amazing for me. So, I'm excited to be here.
Sorry about that. And
that's all right.
Imagine it is one of my favors. But it is when I pick up somewhere in the Amazon, and perhaps I missed 1-0 somewhere. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. I'd like to ask you some things because many people think that coaching is an exotic art, and most of the people think that consulting is something doing by experts for experts. And this is a very large misconception nowadays because a lot of people are afraid to do some consulting or receive some consulting, and of course avoid the coaching at every time. But
right.
First, I'd like to know who Michael is and how you started the Box of Crayons.
Sure.
Tell us about a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. So I live in Canada now. I'm in Toronto. That's where I'm talking from. But I'm actually Australian by birth. So I grew up in Australia and lived there till I was about 25. I went to university in Australia, so I did a degree in English literature and also a law degree. Luckily, I was saved from becoming a lawyer, which I would have been an unhappy and not very good lawyer, by winning that Rhodes Scholarship you mentioned that took me to Oxford, where I met my wife, who happens to be Canadian.
Excellent.
So we lived in England for probably 7 or 8 years, which we enjoyed, not least because how close it was to Europe and the ability to explore and enjoy Europe. Then we moved in 2001 to the States. We lived in Boston for 3 years. At this stage, I was working as a consultant around organizational change. How do you make organizations better, more effective places to live? But then in 2001, we moved to Toronto. And shortly after that, I set up Box of Crayons. And I started off in a kind of general style. You know, I was a consultant, so I knew a bit about change management, and I knew a bit about strategy, and I knew a bit about communications, kind of the various levers that can make a difference to an organization's culture. But over the years, I've come to focus on coaching as a foundational, essential leadership skill for everybody, for managers, for leaders. And our big belief at Box of Crayons is we're not trying to turn anybody into a coach, because there are lots of coaches out there already. What we want is managers and leaders to be more coach-like in the way that they work. And what we mean by that is, can we stay curious a little bit longer? Can we rush to action and advice giving a little bit more slowly? Because, you know, for the folks listening into this podcast, whether you work internally for an organization and you have a role as a leader or manager, or whether you work externally and you work as a consultant helping organizations, all of us tend to have an inclination to leap in and offer up ideas, advice, solutions just a little bit too quickly. I'm certainly not saying that that's a bad idea. I'm just saying that if you can stay curious a little bit longer, you're more likely to have better ideas, and you're more likely to have more influence, and you're more likely to have empowered, engaged people around you in the way that you work.
Excellent. Curiosity is one of the main things, I believe, that not only a consultant but an entrepreneur should have, because
Right.
what businesses is finding the solution to the problems people they do have and they don't imagine that having. And
Right.
consultant is always the in-between that try to map the problems to solutions, if that's
Yeah.
possible for everyone. And that it comes to my second question. You have an abnormal career, but how easily for a person like you with too many occupations and things to do all your day to shift from a regular job streamline, as you were in Boston, I think, and before, the full-time business founder?
Yeah, it's that difference between working for an organization and working for yourself is a big one. And it's one lots of us face, because we've all come to realize that having a full-time job isn't necessarily any more secure than running your own business. Because we're all at risk of being laid off, or a company being downsized or changed in some way. Now, in an organization, you have the blessings and the curse, as my friend of mine would say, the prizes and the punishment of having more control and more certainty. You know who your boss is. You know who your boss's boss is. You know what your job is called. You probably got a understanding of what your responsibilities and your accountability is. And against that, you're like, I'm a little stuck in a hierarchy. I have less freedom to do what I want to do or pursue what I think is most important. You're at the mercy of your organization's culture, which can be a good thing sometimes, but can be a less than good thing some other times. And then if you look, the grass is always greener on the other side, they say. So if you look to the other side, you see people who are running their own businesses. And there are two types of businesses to run broadly. One is what I would call a practice, and one is what I would call a business. And a practice is when you're working for yourself, and you're like, okay, it's just me, and I've got to find a way of earning the money I need to have a good life, and to do the work I need to have a good life. And for many of us, that can be a combination of things. It can be perhaps a little bit of consulting around a topic that you know about, maybe a little bit of training about a topic that you can teach, maybe a bit of coaching if you want to add coaching, maybe you're online and you're selling an online course, maybe you're running a podcast and you're finding sponsorship, so you're getting some money from that. You build a portfolio of different ways to earn your living. For instance, at Box of Crayons, we're a training company. We teach 10-minute coaching to busy managers and leaders. And we have a faculty of about 30 people who deliver our programs around the world. And they are all, they all run their own practice. So they work with one or two or three other training companies, and they spend their time delivering programs. That's what they love to do. The alternative is to grow a business. And one isn't better than the other. It's just different. But the difference is, in growing a business, you have more scale and more impact than running a practice, because now you need to master marketing and sales. Now you have a product. Now you have people who have a working relationship with you. It could be anything from an assistant to head of sales to head of marketing. It's a bigger beast. And some people, they love that. They're all about, I'm growing an organization here. We're going to have, we're targeting X million dollars in revenue, X million dollars in profitability. Other people go, look, I know what a good life looks like for me, and it's a practice-based life. When I started Box of Crayons, it started as a practice, but for the last 10 years or so, definitely it's been a business.
Excellent. I mean, there is a lot of people that they're getting confused of what business is, and I like the way you put the things, because I believe that the practice versus business is a very clear distinction. I usually, when I consult something and I try to orient something, I try to focus someone to find his purpose or her purpose. I mean,
right.
you know the Venn diagram, what you love doing, what the world needs, what you can pay for, and so on
Right,
and so
exactly.
forth. And this is always confusing for many people, because the profession, the vocation, and the mission is always either governed together without have a clear mark and a clear path on what they want to do and who are the people they want to serve at the end of the day. Because they want you have a clear path. For instance, you start training, you have a practice, and you do a little bit of that, you do a little bit of this, and but most people, they want too many money, too many famous altogether, and they want it in a year or so.
Right.
My argument usually it is that you cannot have something if you not invest, and you cannot have a free meal for that.
Right.
And
Yeah,
that.
I agree with you. I like that Venn diagram, the one I use, which is similar, which is, what's the thing that you are good at, that you have some passion around? What's the thing that people will pay for? And then the third thing for me is, how are you a bit different from what other people offer around the same piece?
Exactly.
Because partly you're like, if you're the same as everybody else, you're then a commodity, and you're unable to charge a premium or differentiate yourself or be wanted. So part of it for me is also, what's your twist? What are you going to do differently that's interesting or useful?
Yeah, I totally agree, and that it is. We live in very interesting times now, because we shifting from a working environment that it was very strict to a very free and loose working environment, but a very competitive one. And
That's right.
what I try to make obvious the most of the times with the people I work with and my associate is that you have to focus on what you have to do in a clear path, not in a way that is a cloudy most of the times.
Right.
And that brings me to the third question, because for me, one solution of that problem, this puzzle, it is your personal habits, how you deal yourself within this new environment and this ecosystem. And as an Australian, you know that you have vast, as in internet and Australia it is, you have a vast space to cope, but very limited resources.
Right.
So,
Right. Well, when you're working by yourself, for sure you have to find structures and disciplines to help you work at your best. Now, of course, what that is different for everybody. So it takes some time to find, what are the systems that work for you? I mean, what's the systems you use to stay productive? Is it kind of the classic getting things done, David Allen's work around how to process information coming in and how to keep a clear mind? Is it one of the tools, like a project management tool like Asana or something like that, where you're like, okay, here's how we track projects, maybe Basecamp? Is it a discipline around saying, I don't book meetings till 11 o'clock in the morning so that my mornings are always free for me to work on the work that matters? I mean, in a previous book of mine, Duckus, it's called Do More Great Work. And it says, look, everything you do, everything that's available to you falls into one of three different buckets. It's either bad work, good work, or great work.
Yeah,
so bad work is waste of time, life-sucking, bureaucratic. Why are you even doing it? Good work is your job description. And honestly, whether you work for a company or an organization or whether you work for yourself, we all have a job description. So it's productive and it's efficient and it's getting things done and you know how to do it pretty well, and you probably make a bit of money doing that, either your salary or your consulting revenue. But great work is the work that has more impact and the work that has more meaning. And, both of those things matter. Impact, you're making a difference, but meaning, you care about it. It lights you up. So part of the discipline is to understand, well, for you now, what is your great work project? How much great work do you have at the moment? And is that the right mix with your good work?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the structures you need in your life to do more great work? I had dinner with a friend of mine last night, and he is really smart because he knows that he is terrible at creating anything by himself. He's just not good at it. He gets lost, he gets bored, he gets distracted. He'll do anything to avoid actually doing that. So for him, one of the structures would be find partnerships and work with other people. For me, on the other hand, I'm like, I love collaborating in some circumstances, but if I'm writing a book, it's like, that's just me alone, and I just need time away from my email and away from the internet, just writing words down. So I have a different structure to do that work.
Excellent. This is more like the things I do as well, and everybody does. But for me, it is something I call what matters most to you. Because what you call great work, for me, it is something that has meaning besides money on the side.
Yes.
I mean, I have a passion for many things, but unfortunately, for instance, I love art, but I don't have any more time to do either painting or sketching, because I have 2 kids around, and it is a little bit difficult. So I try to find my mental structure and my business model in order to find to overcome my laziness, if you like, or my time restrictions, and try to automate a lot and outsource a lot to do some things. As your friend, it is also a mental structure, and that I'd like to ask you if you are an organized person, and if you do. How do you achieve your personal and professional goals? You have a system. You mentioned a lot of systems, actually. Around.
The main system I have is I have a sense of my overall mission, my overall vision for the impact I want to have on the world. So the way I talk about it, and I talk about this a bit and do more great work, is I'd like to infect 1 billion people with the possibility virus. So, that will resonate or not resonate for people listening in. But for me, it means, how do I help people around the world make better choices? And how do I do it in a way that gets me out of the way so that the idea and the tools or whatever spreads by themselves? And really the way I tend to work is I tend to go, okay, I work on a project by project basis. After I finish a project, like for instance, after I finish the Coaching Habit book, I then ask myself, of all the things I could be doing, what's the thing that would move me closest to having the impact of infecting 1 billion people with the possibility virus? And sometimes that means it's another book. Sometimes it's running my business. Sometimes it's running a podcast. It depends. So what I try and do is not get too caught up in the minutiae of it, but I keep stepping back and asking myself the big picture questions, which is, okay, what am I trying to do here? I've got there's a writer called Kevin Kelly that some people may know. Yes. He helped create the Wired magazine.
The Wired magazine, yes.
And he's famous for something called 1,000 True Fans, where he says, if you have 1,000 true fans, you can make a good living. But one of the things that I like that he's less well known for is he shows on his website how to calculate the day of your death. Statistically, you work out what an insurer would guess when you die. And he basically says, and you can probably do one major project every 5 years. When you think about what it takes, for instance, to write a book and then get it out in the world and then market it for a couple of years, it's probably been 5 years or thereabouts since I really started working hard on the Coaching Habit book. So if I calculate my day of death, I've got about 25 years left, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, but it's basically 25 years, which means that I've got about 5 big projects left in me.
No, I think
so. Now, when you think about that, you're like, okay, so that's not that many. So make your choices carefully about what you're going to spend your time, because, getting old, Who is it? Hemingway.
It is a bad thing, but it's not that bad most of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So Hemingway, the writer, went, look, the way I became bankrupt is I was slowly and then quickly. And sometimes that's how it feels like getting old. You're slowly getting old, and then suddenly you're like I am. I'm suddenly 50, and I'm like, how did I end up being a 50-year-old man? I still think of myself as a 28-year-old, or maybe a 24-year-old. So it's surprising to be a 50-year-old, and you've got to think that time is only accelerating away from you rather than slowing down. So it's for me, it keeps coming back to that bigger question about what's the impact I'm having in the world, and if that's true, what's the best project I can think of doing right now?
It is wonderful the way you think, and most wonderful the fact that you mentioned Kelly, because one of other best book of mine is The Art of Control, and it gave me the new biosystem of the new systems order, and according to Kevin, you should have a lot of biosystems to spread off through the projects and your book. I mean, your coaching habit is not just an accelerator. It is more or less a matrix of things you can either govern together in order to make a difference. For me,
thank you.
This is the main. It's not just a manual. You can do this and that in order to achieve that. It is something you pick it up according to the problem you have to solve, and you try to think how this question can match this problem, and what is going to be the results. And that's why I'm saying that you have a lot of projects within to go.
Yeah. The project metaphor really works for me as a way of kind of framing what you're up to, because often when you're working, and this can be true whether you're in a big company or whether you're working by yourself, is that your work feels like it just stretches on forever.
I know.
There's no start, there's no end. You could work 24 hours a day if you didn't have to sleep. But what I like about a project is it tends to have a start date and a finish date, and that feels useful in terms of a way of focusing your power.
Yeah, I totally agree, because if you work for yourself, and now I work for myself nowadays, and mostly pro bono because the financial crisis now in Europe and everything. What I do, I try to have a fixation in the hours I tend to devote to a project that it is meaningful for me and my clients.
Great.
I mean, I start the practice to helping people around, and now I try to make it a business, but I'm not quite certain that it's going to work now, because it is a lot of things. But I like to write, and I have a blog that is going to very well. Anyway, what I'd like to ask you is, because I believe in books very much, and your books, it is a real eye-opener for me. What books would you recommend to the people that you would like to help? I mean, people that they want to follow you around. Yeah.
Well, it always depends what you're up for, right? It's like, what challenge are you facing? I'm just looking behind me because I get a lot of books. People send me books to read and comment on all the time. And honestly, most business books are often not that good, but I get really excited when I find a book or two that I really like. So let me pick two from my bookshelf. So one book that's based on the conversation that we've had today is Seth Godin's book called Purple Cow. We were talking about the Venn diagram, and I added and how are you a little bit different? And I think that difference is a really important driver of success. It's a really short book, but I think Seth Godin's book Purple Cow is a really interesting one on why difference matters and how you might think about being different as in the way that you show up in the world. And if I had to pick one other book,
okay,
I'm going to say I really like Adam Grant's book called Give and Take. He has a great newsletter, by the way, and some great TED Talks. So if you don't know Adam Grant's work, you could check out his newsletter and his TED Talks. But his book called Give and Take was his breakthrough book. And It effectively argues that, there are three types of people in the world: the givers, the takers, and then the people who kind of, I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back.
Yes.
And he's like, so who succeeds? Who actually has most success in the work that they do? And first of all, he said, who has least success? And it turns out that givers are the ones that have least success. They're at the bottom of the pile because people can overgive and they're too generous, and it leaves them exhausted and kind of depleted and out of resources and people take advantage of that. But what I love is that when he looked at who was most successful, he found that givers, again, were most successful because there's a certain type of giver that is generous and abundant, but also smart in how they give. So they don't give in a way that kind of puts themselves at risk, but they give without expectation because they're putting good out into the world. Mm-hmm. And I love that philosophy, both because, one of the core values of Box of Crayons is be generous. So we're looking to give. But it also says, but don't be stupid about it. Be generous, but in a smart way.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Lately, I read your work about performance management, and I'd like to ask you, for the sake of my readers, what performance management is. I know because I came from a corporate world. Yeah. But for the most of the people, performance management is one of the key words that is out of the normal business vocabulary.
Sure. So in big organizations, you need to have some understanding of how well people are doing. Are they thriving? Are they struggling? Are they contributing? Are they not contributing to your organization? And for years, the way that was done was through what people call a performance management process, which typically means that once a year you sit down with your boss and she or he says, okay, you're doing well or you're not doing well, and this is what you need to work on next year. And often, sometimes they'll say, and here's a bit of a pay rise or here's a bonus or something like that. So these conversations have traditionally been both a moment of reward, there's some money changes hands, but also a kind of, and here's how you're doing and here's what you got to work on to be better next year. That process doesn't work that well. It only happens once a year. Everybody's a bit anxious about it. There's this way that you combine paying people and praising people. And what you want is people striving and doing their very best and having the best impact that they can. But that's a contradiction when you say to people, we're only going to pay you if you hit certain targets and you don't make any mistakes. So we're really interested in the way performance management is changing, in part because we believe that coaching is part of the solution to making performance management a better process. Mm-hmm. Because you can imagine, and whether you work for a big company or not, it doesn't matter, but you can imagine that given the choice between having somebody telling you once a year how you're doing and having somebody coaching you on an ongoing basis to support you to do better, everybody wants the coaching option, right? Because they're like, I want to keep growing. I want to have immediate feedback. I want to know what I need to do to improve. I want to take responsibility for my own career. I don't want you standing around and just judging me once a year. There's no fun in that. So that's what performance management is. And we're very focused on the coaching as a powerful tool to help organizations reimagine their performance management process.
Excellent. I believe that you use the coaching in the more ideal standards as a leverage to multiply the results either in the company level or in a business level. So, one final question. If you could give one piece of advice to a new entrepreneur or a new business owner or a wannabe business owner, what would be that, Michael?
So this is so the Coaching Habit book has 7 questions, and it says, look, 7 good questions can really help you thrive and change as a leader. But these questions are good to not only ask other people, they're good to ask yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most powerful, there are 2 powerful questions that I think are worth asking. Doesn't matter what you do. If you're starting a business, you're running your business, you're not in a business, but you're dreaming of setting up your own business, you're in an organization and you love it, doesn't matter. The first question is this: what do you want? Because that's hard. That's actually a hard question to answer. And, when you start your own business, quite often what you want is just to survive.
Yeah.
I just need to earn a bit of money.
Yeah.
But to get clearer about what you really want, what would light you up, what matters to you, what would bring you happiness, that's a really big, powerful, difficult question to wrestle with. So I think sitting with that, what you want, is a good first question. The second question I'd offer up is, what will you say no to so you can say yes to the thing that matters most to you? Because most of us are not that good at saying no. And for our yeses to have any real weight and meaning and have a chance of coming true, the things that we want, we have to get a little bit better at saying no to stuff as well. So I'd encourage people to be thinking about what are the no's that you need to say to projects, to people, to opportunities, so that you can say to kind of internal fears and anxieties, so you can say yes to the stuff that will mean most to you.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. I'd like to thank you, Michael, for being today with us. And I'd like to re-invite you in a later time to discuss some more, because I think your ideas are not only innovative, but it is also very humane. I mean, you approach business in a humane way that appealed too much for me, and I think to many of my readers.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank you very much for being today with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me along.
You're welcome, Michael. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Have a beautiful morning.
Thank you all for listening today. I'd love to see you at the next episode of Leadership Initiative Podcast. If you have a question or a comment, please send me a message at my site, takistanasiou.com. Until next time, take the initiative to become the person you want to be. Start now and make a difference. Thank you all for listening.